Side, but we will tell you there is a heated debate over the president's new call for war powers against ISIS. Congress has been holding hearings, some members talking about writing their own authorization of force against ISIS. One top-ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee has already done that. Schiff wrote an ISIS war powers resolution last year, and he's been meeting with White House officials as they drafted this week's bill. Schiff is advocating a targeted, precise approach to ISIS, and unlike the White House, he wants to repeal both of the other war resolutions before passing a new one. I interviewed him for the first edition of a new series, Rules of Engagement.
The joint resolution is passed.
It's been more than a decade since Congress passed a war resolution, but as ISIS continues executing hostages, the president is asking for new war powers to confront a rapidly evolving threat.
It is not the authorization of another ground war. This resolution strikes the necessary balance by giving us the flexibility we need for unforeseen circumstances.
Congressional leaders in both parties agree the U.S. should act in some way against ISIS, but they differ on the details. Schiff, the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, has spent months advocating a targeted war resolution, and he wrote his own draft before the White House introduced one this week.
My meetings and discussions with the administration really started last year. Our institution had the most to lose by this stalemate, and I think we did lose a great deal, because we set a precedent that future presidents could make war for half a year without the Congress bothering to weigh in.
He believes Congress should confront mistakes it made when authorizing the counterattack on al-Qaeda in 2001 and the Iraq War in 2002.
One is that we ought to have some kind of a geographic limitation on this authorization. Otherwise, this president or a future president could use it anywhere in the world in a context wholly different than what's going on today.
Those war resolutions for operations in Afghanistan and Iraq were invoked as the legal basis to bomb several other countries as the threat spread.
I have the authority to address the threat from ISIL, but I believe we are strongest as a nation when the president and Congress work together.
Schiff warns that the risk of mission creep is not only geographic, it can also be a product of defining the enemy too vaguely.
The president has relied on this term, associated forces, to be able to go after groups like ISIL, which didn't exist at the time that the original authorization was written. So we have to be very careful about terms that might authorize this or next president to, say, go after Boko Haram and say that's an associated of ISIL, or go after terrorists anywhere in the globe, from the Philippines to Malaysia to Nigeria, potentially.
Another key limit on the fight against ISIS is a simple one: a deadline.
It contains a sunset date of 3 years, which I think is an appropriate length of time in the sense that it will get us past the presidential election.
While many Democrats want rules to narrow operations against ISIS, it is top Republicans who object to limiting powers for the president when it comes to war.
It is deeply ironic that a GOP that has called this president an imperial president, a king, would want to give him really unbridled war-making power. And one of the most serious areas of our work, one of the most important checks and balances in the Constitution, and that is Congress's power to declare war, that many of my GOP colleagues are suddenly willing to give the president carte blanche.
Yet top Republicans say it's simply bad policy for Congress to micromanage any commander-in-chief at war.
I don't want to limit the president's ability to take on the terrorist threat directly.
It will require boots on the ground. The question is, whose boots? And I think it'd be a very foolish mistake for us to say in advance what we won't do.
In the end, however, the president's new proposal fundamentally changes America's debate over ISIS, moving from rhetoric and platitudes to rules and specifics. That offers Congress a chance, Schiff says, to stop politicking and start defining a war that's already 6 months old.
It won't be a purely partisan difference. There will be, I think, many libertarian Republicans who are likewise concerned about giving the president too much authority to make war in too many parts of the globe, who are likely to join with Democrats in wanting some constraining principles in this new authorization.